Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Mantar, Pain is Forever and This is the End, out July 15th on Metal Blade Records. The album has 10 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the German duo's fifth full-length studio album. From a design perspective, the album feels simple, very direct, very to the point. There's not much to it. You press play, you listen, and you're just coming along for the ride. Well, while there's some truth to that, the album has a lot of ebbs and flows that you normally don't see on such a direct, stripped-down record. This album doesn't give you two songs that sound or feel the same back to back. The influences that come in from the soundscape and the experience of that soundscape really dictate all the ups and downs, all the ripples that exist within the construction of this album. And that sort of fluidity, that sort of momentum is great because it allows the listener to stay connected with the record, not giving you a sense that you've heard this song before. Everything feels fresh, everything feels new. It's also an album that doesn't force you to dive deep into it in order to get it. That adds to the playability of the record and makes the album all around feel more connected. When it comes down to the sound also has a sense of simplicity to it because once again, it's easy to digest. There's not a lot of layers, but the construction of the songs are perhaps the only element that feels complex because they all have the same goal in mind, which is to take you to a point where you absolutely connect directly with the experience of the song, either be through the chorus in terms of how catchy, how hooky it is, or through a guitar riff or a melody that becomes the DNA, the trademark of that specific song. They don't repeat the formula back to back, but they kind of use that same module song in and song out. And that impacts the soundscape, it impacts how you feel towards it, and impacts the movement that it has. The album is not dictated by a single genre. That also adds life, adds energy, adds fluidity to the overall record. Sometimes you're listening to this album and certain songs feel like they are post-grunge, some post-punk, some others post-metal, some post-metal punk. There's a little bit of everything under the sun as far as what's influencing the sound, but they're just influencing the sound because after a certain point it becomes Mantar's own sound, their own design, their own creation, and those influences was just the starting point, was just that fuel that lit the fire. Everything else became part of who they are. An album that also sounds very organic, almost like a jam session. You press record, you go, how you feel in that moment is what's going to come across track in, track out. An album that carries its heart on its sleeve and it comes across shirtless. That's the best way to describe the experience of listening to Pain is Forever and This is the End. Now, obviously, if you're talking about Mantar, you have to talk about drums and guitars. I really like the drums because in the little bit of chaos that exists in this album, the drums are one wall, the vocals are the other, the guitars are the chaos in between. Now, the drums are very consistent. They create that wall of consistency from start to finish. I like the fact that they don't overground the record, but they do give it some oomph. They don't have a lot of texture, but they do have enough substance to feel like they're adding thickness, that they're adding perimeter, or they're moving along the width of the record and the width of the songs. Then in the middle you have the guitars, very volatile. Some of those influences that I talked earlier, they're perhaps more noticeable in how the guitar sound comes across in terms of what's the starting point and what's the finish line. How are you gonna connect the dots? How are you gonna bring the listener along? A lot of the movement, a lot of the volatility really comes down to the guitars, the movement that they create, the experiences that they give, the things that they make you think of. There's certain melodies, certain sounds, certain approach that reminded you of something, somewhere, somehow. And that is a beautiful way of creating a sound that's going to be unique to this album, that's going to be unique to this experience, but still allows the listener to connect to another experience that they had previously. On the other wall, you have the vocals, another element of consistency. What you get in the beginning is going to be what you're going to get all the way through. There's not a lot of variety. There are some layers here and there, but they never really change the tonality or how the vocals come across and the impact that they have with the lyrical content. The main difference, I would say, as far as vocals are concerned, is that they feel a little bit more stripped down. They feel slightly more natural than they did in previous records. They don't feel as forced. They just feel a little bit looser, a little bit more organic, a little bit more fluid, like the rest of the album is. So they match the same emotion, they match the same experience, the same atmosphere as the sound, as the overall design. Now, this is a record that took me a few listens to get into it, because I came in with a perceived idea of what I was expecting this album to be based on the previous records by the band. And this album is a departure from what we've seen previously. Perhaps more direct, perhaps more subtle, not as abrupt, not as in your face. A little bit more stepping back and creating an album that has goals in mind, that wants to be hooky, that wants to be catchy, that wants to be memorable, that has a little bit more of a song structure to the individual songs and therefore to the overall design, and not just relying on one element and one element alone in order to create an impact with the listener. So it's a more diversified sounding record, but that comes across in a very simple way. It's a record that if you come in with a preconceived idea of what the previous albums were, it's going to take you a very long time to get into it. If you strip that out of the way, I think you can connect with this album at a different level. This is definitely different from Mantar. It's not the same band recreating a record that they've released in the past. This kind of breaks the line from what they've did up until this point and perhaps what they will do from this point going forward. So it's an album that's not going to be for everybody, but I think there's enough in this record to really connect, maybe not necessarily with an old audience, but definitely with a new one. As far as favorite records are concerned, or favorite tracks I should say, I want to start off with Grim Reaping. Great rock riff. I mean, this song sounds like a rock song, like something out of Motorhead. It has great grit in its sound, great grit in its vocals. The melody is very hooky, not depending alone on the chorus to make the song hooky, but also adding a melody behind it that emphasizes how hooky the chorus eventually becomes. There's also some darkness, and that darkness permeates throughout the entire song, something that doesn't become consistent with every single track. Every track has its own experience, its own atmosphere, but this one felt a little bit darker, but it goes with the lyrical content. It goes with their trying to offer the listener. It feels simple at times, it feels very direct, but that simplicity and the fact that it's very direct, having that memorable melody, having that chorus, makes the song hooky, makes the song catchy. It allows you to not to forget how the track comes about, how the track sounds, and you'll be humming it, which is the absolute point of the overall album, not just this song. Next you have Piss Ritual. This is a great track. It felt a little bit grungy, felt maybe like post-grunge, but it has a huge grunge influence in the sound, in the approach, in the lyrical content. Everything about this song has a bit of chaos in it. And the chaos at times feels controlled, and the chaos at times doesn't feel controlled. This volatility that exists throughout the track keeps you on the edge of your seat. You never really know when this song is going to lose it completely or when it's going to come back into its original path. The vocal approach helps define that chaos, helps define a little bit of the parameters of that chaos, but the sound, specifically the guitars, are absolutely phenomenal. They really change it up throughout this entire song, keeping you, like I said, on the edge of your seat. Last but not least, New Age Pagan, a more defined, a more refined track from the previous two. The previous two are very direct, very to the point, with a structure underneath it that perhaps offers some more complexity to the way the tracks come across. But this song is well refined across every single parameter. First of all, it feels thicker. It sounds thicker. The guitars are thicker, not as driven, not as gritty on this specific song. Then the atmosphere also becomes bigger and thicker because of it. It moves methodically at times, but it also has some explosive moments into it, specifically the chorus. The chorus feel a little bit more bombastic, they feel a little bit more explosive, but they never lose that thickness of sound that the song has from start to finish. This creates great ebbs and flows, it creates great movement without necessarily having to create a song that comes at you perhaps too fast. Moving well, moving methodically with ups and downs, enough to keep you connected, enough to keep you engaged. This is it, Mantar with Pain is Forever, and this is the end. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.